You're watching What Market Wants. 6 days left for Union Budget, and we have been discussing the various taxation issues, sectors to bet on, stocks to bet on. We have an audience here as well who would like to ask some questions. So let's open the floor. Yes, fourth row. Please identify yourself and also the question, the guest that you want to ask the question.
Hi, my name is Deepak Khemani. The question is regarding this bad bank which is being talked about. First of all, is it a good idea or not? And it's not that it hasn't been done before. Suti was actually a bad bank, isn't it?
See, the bad bank, if I may take it, so the bad bank by itself, I mean, see, what purpose does it solve, right? So the other economies, like say the US, the problem was that the mortgage holders were too diffuse. And there was also a liquidity problem because the banks couldn't dispose of them fast enough. So you had to create a bad bank to infuse liquidity into the system and to also consolidate those assets so that you could eventually sell them off. Now, these were functioning assets which you could actually find a market value for later. The problem in India is the reverse. So the problem in India is that the lenders are too fragmented. The assets are, steel plants, broken power plants, broken roads, or just gold-plated companies. Now, there needs to be some solution where you can consolidate on the lending side. So basically, the problem is the resolution is taking so much time because there are too many banks which are having to go back to their boards and take approvals for all write-downs, etc. So you need to have some solution like that, but it cannot be the classic bad bank that has worked, say, in the savings and loan crisis in the US in the 80s and 90s, and then during the global financial crisis. So it has to be something like a bad bank, I mean, some entity that needs to be created, but I don't think it will be a classic bad bank the way it was in other economies.
Okay. Just to add on the Suti issue, that time there was a solvency issue also. There's no solvency issue in the banking system right now. So what's the hurry? And the important part also remember is that when you do a bad bank, you also miss the opportunity to reform a lot of these SOE banks.
Okay. Any more questions? Yes, in the second row. Yeah. Speak on the mic, please, if you can.
Myself, Rajesh Podar. My question is, since the budget is due next week, whether we see Nifty 6,300 before or 7,700? Also, since most of the PSU banks are in trouble, can we go ahead and buy private bank like Axis, Kotak,
Okay,
ICICI?
Nilesh, you want to do
please.
the crystal ball gazing?
No, I'll leave the Nifty levels to Anuj. I think he's better at it. So, but I think clearly, I think in terms of the overall banking system, I think there's still some time to go before you can buy the state-owned banks. I think the private banks, to me, look expensive. Okay, so they're good, they're efficient, and I think they'll last. But I think at this stage, they look expensive.
Okay, before we take fresh questions, in the break, Dinesh, you were telling us that there are a couple of issues which we haven't touched upon yet in terms of raising the revenues.
Well, I think one question which you raised, and which was with regard to how does the government raise non-tax revenues? Is there a room out there? And one of the inevitable things which comes up is that there are PSUs, and you can't do divestment at this stage because the values are not right. Maybe this is not the right time. And the question is, are there any different ways in which you could monetize the value of PSUs? And one thing which has been done last year very innovatively and maybe needs to be done a lot more is whether PSUs can be encouraged to give what we call as bonus debentures. Bonus debentures by and large has been a feature of private sector. The one public sector we did it and did it very nicely last year was NTPC. So let's take, for example, Coal India Limited. I think they've got reserves of close to 30,000 crores. Now, if they were to issue bonus debentures, which were to be redeemed after a length of time, maybe at the end of 8th, 9th, 10th year, then they are declaring a dividend on which they of course pay dividend distribution tax, but they don't lose liquidity. And the money remains within the company can use it for the purpose of development. The government gets a coupon, a paper, which it can really trade in and get nearly virtually the par value because the rate of interest is something which would be market driven. And that could really result in a lot of value unlocking at that point of time. And I thought that's something which the government has done, but done maybe in bits and pieces, but something which it can do very much more and raise huge resources.
Oh, that's a very valid point.
So if, for example, you spoke about so we spoke about numbers 25,000 crores, and the question was, can the government go to 50, 60,000 crores for recapitalization?
Yeah.
There's something where resources resources can come in and can be used to plow in the right direction.
Okay, so Mr. Kanabar has stepped into the finance minister's shoes and told us what he would do if he were finance minister. Neil can't come in on that. You know, the fiscal space that is needed to meet a lot of the objectives is somewhere around 1.4% of GDP. If you were the finance minister, how would you meet that fiscal space, and how would you raise non-tax revenues?
I don't think the numbers are that large. See, one is that you need to also build in the fact that the pay commission effectively pays for itself. In an economy with a lot of slack, it actually acts as a stimulus. One, all of these are, employees who are in the formal sector, so there is a TDS on income tax. Most of the things they consume, so if you look at the consumption baskets, most of the things they consume, like housing, like cars, petrol, these are, at the higher fractiles of consumers, which is where the government consumers are, government employees are. These are all very heavily taxed items. And therefore, the pay commission can effectively pay for itself. So the number is actually far lower than the 1.4%. And I think with prudent disinvestment, I think it can be very much met. You don't need to really get very creative with that.
Okay, just about 5 minutes left. So let's take some more questions from the audience. First row, yeah, please.
Hi, my name is Shubham Mathur. I've got two questions. One is the fact that we are looking at a lot of sectors, specifically banks. But there are three sectors which are, coming up. One is defense. Second is the renewable energy sources, solar, wind and all. And third is railways. The government is going really more on these three sectors. This is one of my questions. So are we really expecting anything big on the budget? And second, government tends to run to companies like Coal India, for divestments and all that when it is in the cash crunch. Is it really the right thing to do? Because you're just selling your family silver. One day you will not be left with such a company. So what will you do then?
So who is your question directed towards?
Anybody. Yeah.
Okay. Gautam, you want to take that?
I'll take the second one first. So when you're selling your family silver and using it to, say, build more family silver, roads, spending on health, which is all for the country. So actually it might be a more prudent investment to sell your silver in, say, oil and gas, airlines, telecom, and build something more lasting and much more helpful for the economy.
You said airlines, Air India.
Possibly.
Yeah.
Okay, Nilesh, what about you?
Yeah, and I think I'll probably build on to what Gautam said. I think just rather than selling already listed companies, I think one thing which we've always been wanting is, IPOs or NFOs of unlisted state-owned companies. So we've been talking about, LIC being a very strong potential listing candidate. And in a year like this, where the government needs to raise a lot of money. If I were the finance minister, what I would do is I'd probably prepare a list of some 4 or 6 very valuable state-owned companies and say every quarter I will go ahead and list 1 or 2 companies where the government will go ahead and sell 10% stake and raise revenue. So I think it's important to have that kind of a KRA and go ahead and execute that plan. I think some of the IPOs have shown that irrespective of market conditions, if it's a quality IPO, there is appetite, it gets subscribed. So I don't think we should use poor market conditions as an excuse and say that, this is not the right time to IPO. We've seen IPOs also working and succeeding. And I think that's what is an important thing the government can do.
What about railways, Nilesh? We have a fairly savvy railway minister also now. Okay. Could that be a sector that could be looked at?
I think it's a very important, very large sector. That's one. Two is I think that's again where the central government, it's in the complete discretion of the central government. You really don't need to go back to individual state governments apart from some, land approvals, etc., I think. But I'm not too sure how much we can, look at in the listed space. Anything very, meaningful or not. Of course, there are some of those obvious names like, Siemens, ABB, which have some bit of, revenues coming in from that as a segment. So, for example, if you look at railways, you look at the bullet train project from Bombay, Ahmedabad, almost 90,000 crore project and all of that. But I'm not too sure how much of that value will actually percolate down to publicly listed companies. There might be some companies which will benefit because they'll go and do some of the low-end work of contracting and things of that kind. But beyond that, I'm not too sure how much it is there for public markets.
That's a fair point. And railway stocks, in any case, have not been great wealth creators in the past. Neelkant, you want to comment on that? 2 sectors that he asked about, defense and railways. On railways, how would you rate the scorecard the 1 year of the new railway minister, and what would your expectations be?
See, the railways is 40% plus of the central government employment, right? So it's a really massive organization. It's 14 lakh people. I mean, people take 2 years to turn around a 500 people organization. This is 14 lakh people, 13 lakh people, plus a large number of contractors. I think what has been achieved is very, very dramatic and significant. I think extra budgetary resources have been collected. I think participation with state governments in development of these has been improved. One of the reasons, for example, that Coal India has managed volumes is that the state governments were taken into confidence. I think that's proceeding very well with railways as well. But one of the biggest challenges for the rail minister in this budget is going to be that post the pay commission, the salaries and pensions as a percentage of revenues is going to be nearly 70%. And unless he takes a 15-20% tariff hike on both passenger and freight, I think the budget will be hard to manage. And if he does that, he risks losing more market share to road. And I think that will be the biggest challenge. So that will be the most interesting thing in the rail budget as to how he manages to match the numbers.
Okay, well, we have completely run out of time, so it's going to be one last question to all of you, just a one-word answer. Will this be a game-changer budget or will it be a run-of-the-mill budget? Let me start with you, Nilesh.
I'm not too sure of either. Probably it's going to be somewhere in between.
Okay, that's not sticking your neck out, but I'll let you go.
No, I think all budgets are run-of-the-mill budgets now. So I think the big budgets of the early 90s are behind us.
Okay, run-of-the-mill. What about you?
Exactly the way Neil can put it.
Okay, Dinesh?
I think it actually can be a game changer from a perspective that ease of doing business is becoming a big thing. Tax as a negative aspect on the ease of business is a key issue. If we are able to give a predictable tax regime for which we actually have a government committee report right down there, and if that is implemented, it could actually create a lot of confidence, particularly for foreign investors. And while it may not be a game changer in an immediate sense, it could lay down a roadmap for being a game changer.
Okay, so the House believes that it will be a run-of-the-mill budget, right?
Yeah, at least the market believes that.
At least the market
Sonia,
believes that. What about you?
The market has factored that in run-of-the-mill budget, Sonia. That's what the budgets are normally, right? Game changer, let's see. That would be a big hope.
All right, well, on that note, we will wind up this special coverage of what the market wants. Until we meet on the budget, thanks for watching.